Today, I want to talk about a sneaky little interval called flat nine. The flat nine interval is something you'd learn in more advanced harmony. But this is directed specifically towards beginning and intermediate players who aren't aware of some places that you can find this interval just in simple diatonic harmony. I hope you all know what I mean by diatonic harmony. That means within the scale, and we mean within the major scale. A lot of this is sort of just glossed over by teachers and books and theories, and so it's really important that you understand the negative potential of this interval, even though you're a beginner. I've just over the years had the experience of hearing solos where this idea was not, this topic was not discussed beforehand. Let's figure out what a flat nine interval is first. Okay, so if you start on the note C and you go up an octave, and we just number everything, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then once you go over an octave, now it's 9, 10, 11. So here's 8, an octave. And if I go up to the next note of the major scale, but now it's the next note plus an octave, we've got a major ninth interval. Okay, it's not rocket science or anything. It's that simple. And when we build chords, we go over the octave as well, don't we? When we move in thirds, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, etc. 2 is 9, 4 is 11, 6 is the 13th, plus an octave. Any way you want to figure that out, you can go C up to D and then an octave, but however you figure it, this is what we end up with. That's a major 9 interval, okay? If we lower this D a half step, that, my friends, is a flat 9 interval. It's a minor 9, but is commonly referred to as a flat 9 interval. And we find this, like I said previously, in advanced harmony, in what would be called chromatic harmony. In other words, any scale that is not the major scale. So we're not going to get into anything like that at all. I'm just telling you where this comes from, where it works fine. Flat 9 works fine in chromatic harmony. In diatonic harmony, it is out of the question. We want it gone. But there's some certain specific cases where this puppy comes up, and I just want to make you aware of it so you can avoid it at all costs. Okay, so let's start. How could I come up with a flat 9 interval if I'm just using the major scale? Well, I'm going to show you right now how we could do that. If we build a major chord starting from the root, we already know we can build a triad. We're moving in thirds. Now if I add another tone and go up to the 7th, this is all beautiful. So we got 1, 3, 5, major 7, 9. That's all sounds good. And now if we're still using the major scale, which we have to, right? We're using C major scale as our source to build our chord stack, which at Fretboard Freedom we call a chord family, which is a great way to think of it. When we went up a third again, now we'd end up with the note F. And after that, the last note would be 13th. And now we've used all 7 notes of the major scale, haven't we? 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. So that's as far as you can go. You can have a 7-part chord built from the major scale. theoretically. But there is no such thing as a C major 11 chord. And if somebody writes that for you and says, yes, this is part of my tune, then I would run away. No, there is no major 11 chord, and here's the reason why. When you have the third of this chord, E, below the 11th, which in this case is F, right? The fourth is F, up an octave is an 11th. Lo and behold, there's that terrible sound. So we can understand this that way right off the bat. I hope you've never had to hear a song that, right? It just doesn't happen. And players who have no harmony background at all just automatically understand that's not going to work for them, either as a chord type or in the context of improvisation or melody writing. So let's talk about that, because this is where it gets really important. You've got a song, and the first chord is C major 7. That's beautiful, okay? And then you're improvising, and you say to yourself, well, this chord comes from the C major scale. I guess I'm going to use the C major scale. Makes perfect sense to me. Beautiful. Until you do something with a note that we call resting. In other words, a tone that sits there for a while. Maybe a tone that you target to sit on for a while. So let's say it was C major 7. A great target tone might be the note B. Right? Sounds great. So you might say to yourself, well, all the notes of the C major scale, that's the scale that the chord came from, so they should all be resting tones. Well, here we go again. Now, F is just not going to work, is it? Okay, and so we learn, even if you don't understand it from a harmony theory perspective, your ear most certainly does. Again, in diatonic harmony, this interval is just a complete wipeout. Get it? Get rid of it. But then you're going to ask, I hope, well, you mean I can't use the C major scale? Absolutely, you can use the C major scale. But F has to be something that we call a passing tone. It cannot just be a resting tone. It just doesn't work. And that includes the idea of creating a melodic phrase and even though it's only there for a second, just as terrible as could be. Yikes. So, what we mean by passing tone is going one direction or the other and getting to the next available note. If you're familiar, let's say you've been through boot camp or some other of our products, then you understand that this is an active tone and it wants to resolve. And in this case, wow, does it want to resolve? So you can use it though like this. Any kind of direction. just as long as you don't end with it or sit on it. Passing tone. That's all you can do with that. Now, I said there's no such thing as a C major 11 chord, and there is not, and there should not ever be. What we do in order to take care of that problem is we have to change scales. And that's unfortunate in the context of being a beginner. This chord family actually has to use two different scales depending on its level of sophistication. So I'm not going to get into that now, except to say that the other scale that we use includes F sharp instead of F, and now we can have something called a major 9 sharp 11. And then that note can become a resting tone. And you can hear it already. It has implications of being more sophisticated, more jazz oriented, even though there are some pretty famous rock ideas using that kind of idea in a very specific way, but nonetheless. So if you're interested in that, which I always encourage you to get into the chord families, it will change your life. Definitely look into that. This would be called chord family 1, which is the 1 chord in major. Is there another place where that problem can come up? Yes. Actually, a couple. We'll talk about those two right now. Back to our C major 7 chord. And then back to our, well, we could use the C major scale, no problem. Well, here's another, yes, there is another problem with this. If I put the C, the root of our chord, the tonic of our scale, you would go, I've got to be able to use C, right? No, it doesn't work. With a major 7 chord, we have the note B, which is the 7th, right? 1, 3, 5, 7. When you get an octave above that, there it is again. I use the word dreaded, the dreaded flat 9 interval. So it doesn't matter to us whether it's an advanced interval or an intermediate interval. It's terrible. And we want to run away from it as much as possible. So what does that become? Instead of a resting tone, it becomes a passing tone. Sorry. Beautiful. And again, you don't really want to end a phrase even. Anything that amplifies that shape, we want to stay away from. So that's going to include this idea. We work on pentatonic like crazy, right? And you would say, well, C major pentatonic over C major 7. Again, you would think so, right? But the same problem exists. And there's actually a different pentatonic scale that you would use. In this case, it would be G major pentatonic, and that's a harmony lesson. But that works really well. And it works well because it doesn't have the note C in it. Okay. Staying in diatonic harmony, let's look at building a chord from the 5th degree of the scale. So C, D, E, F, G. G is the 5th of C. And now we're going to do our same approach, is that so now we've got 1, 3, 5. In this case, it's going to be flat 7, 9, 11, 13. So have we ever heard of a chord like G11? Yes. Or maybe you haven't, but G11 or an 11th chord is perfectly acceptable once you learn a rule. And that rule is that the 11th, again, just like with the major chord we did, can't have the 3rd in it. So if you've learned your harmony, your diatonic harmony, the rule for the dominant chord is whenever the 11th is involved, the 3rd has to be omitted. Now, composers and arrangers who know their stuff and do things the right way and want to avoid possible train wrecks in their music go in a different direction and say, I'll create a chord symbol that's F with a slash G. And that'll just mean F major triad with a G in the bass. And I'm sure you've heard that sound. That's a very common in all kinds of styles, smooth jazz, all over the place. So we create chord symbols instead of saying G11, and you have somebody playing who may not really understand that and tries to do this kind of thing, So there's different ways to write chord symbols that make sure that this note is just out no matter what. When I say F over G, that means no thank you when it comes to the note B, the 3rd. We don't want it. Okay? So these are where the challenges come in. And I wish diatonic harmony was just so uncomplicated that we didn't have to think about it at all when we improvise. But this is truly a challenge that you want to look out for, because it can create some bad improvisational ideas. Okay? So, in fact, I'll just give you one last shot at this thinking chordally. If I take a major 7, or C major 7 chord, and I do what we call systematic inversion, and I assume most of you know what I mean by that, systematic inversion of triads, we've done like crazy, but you can do systematic inversion of 4-part as well. And all that systematic inversion means is that the root moves to the 3rd moves to the 5th, the 5th moves to the 7th, and the 7th to the root. In other words, it always has to be that way. That's systematic. That's what is systematic about it. So here is a shape of C major 7, which is 1, 5, 7, 3. If I move up the neck and I go 1 to 3, 5 to 7, 7 to the root, and 3rd to the 5th, I end up with this. That's an inversion of C major 7. A very pretty one, very nice one. I love to, I make sure I've got this shape under my belt. great things you can do with that. So there's my first inversion. The next one would be this, systematically. So all three of those are great. But when you get up to the, we've got 4 notes, so there's 4 possibilities. Here's the 4th one. And so you find out instantly, you could probably see it if you can't hear it, there it is. So that shape isn't going to work. So in my beginning chord melody program, we find ways to get around that, to replace it with different shapes. But there's another example, and it shows, without a doubt, what's going on there.